Prep for Thanksgiving at Whole Foods Market. Save now on no antibiotics ever frozen whole turkey, just $1.49 a pound with Prime. Sales on brie and select seafood appetizers help get things started. For sides, go with wallet-happy favorites from 365 by Whole Foods Market. And finish with decadent desserts from the bakery. Or get your whole spread catered. Just order early. Get Thanksgiving ready at Whole Foods Market. Terms apply.
This episode is brought to you by LifeLock. So much of your personal info is out of your control, like your insurance provider that has your social security number and your favorite retailer that has your payment details. If they get breached, your information, your identity, is vulnerable. That's why LifeLock monitors millions of data points a second for threats. If your identity is stolen, they'll fix it, guaranteed or your money back. Save up to 40% your first year at LifeLock.com/podcast. Terms apply.
During this election season, enjoy a special sale on your DSR Network membership. Use code ELECTION24 to get 50% off your membership. Because the news might be overwhelming, but the analysis of the news doesn't have to be. Let the DSR Network give you something to look forward to by becoming a member and getting exclusive election content, ad-free listening experiences, and access to our Discord and Slack communities. So up until the election, go to thedsrnetwork.com/buy and use code ELECTION24 to get a discount that will make this election season not only bearable, but enjoyable. That's thedsrnetwork.com/buy and code ELECTION24. We hope you enjoy the show.
This is the Daily Blast from the New Republic, produced and presented by the DSR Network. I'm your host, Greg Sargent. It's finally Election Day, and if Donald Trump is going to be defeated in this contest, it will probably come down to women. By many indications, from polls to the early vote, female voters look poised to vote for Kamala Harris in startling numbers, and if she's going to win, this is probably how it will happen. Liz Cheney went on The View on Monday and flatly predicted it. Women will save us from Trump in this election. She also laid out a clear argument for why women, including right-leaning and conservative women, should and will vote for Harris in the numbers needed to defeat him. Today we're discussing this with Stella Sexton, who's the vice chair of the Democratic Party in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, because if women are going to decide this election in Harris's favor, it will be in places like Lancaster. Stella, thanks so much for coming on.
Oh, thanks for having me, Greg.
Stella, let's start by talking about Lancaster County. It's southwest of Philadelphia, went for Trump in 2020 by 57 to 41%. It's a mix of the small city of Lancaster and also rural and exurban stretches. Can you tell us about Lancaster's demographics and why it's so important for understanding where Pennsylvania is going in this election?
Yeah, sure. Lancaster County is a really interesting place right now because it is probably just about the next most flippable county after the collar counties around Philadelphia all flipped during the Trump years. And we have a really incredible mix of population here, from certainly the traditional sort of Pennsylvania Dutch folks and folks of that heritage to a really diverse group of individuals from all over the world, because we are really the refugee resettlement capital of the nation. So we have wonderful communities here, and it makes it such a great, vibrant place to live. We have a growing economy, good schools, a lot of in-migration from other areas, which accelerated during COVID due to cheaper real estate prices and a lot of folks just moving here for the quality of life.
And there are some big rural stretches, right? It's pretty Trumpy in some parts. Can you talk about that a bit?
It is. There are definitely some Trumpier areas, but there are also a lot of areas that are rapidly purpling. I mean, there's 550,000 people in this county. So while, folks talk about it as a rural county, and we certainly do have many beautiful rural areas, it is no longer really a rural county due to the population size that we have here.
Yeah, and this is the kind of place where Harris has to really cut into Trump's margins to win, I think. Let's listen to a clip of Liz Cheney on The View. Cheney was asked whether women will save us in this election, and here's how she responded.
Well, number one, yes, women are going to save the day in this election. I really believe that. And every time you see people like Charlie Kirk or Donald Trump, those people come out and act as though they're somehow horrified that, a woman might make her own decision about how she's going to vote. Some of they have actually, talked about repealing the 19th Amendment. Some of those people working for Donald Trump. So people people need to really remember the misogynist aspect of all of this.
Stella, this seems like it's directly aimed at right-leaning independent women, maybe moderate Republican women. There are a lot of women like this in Lancaster, right? What is your experience of that demographic there? Are they thinking along the lines of what Liz Cheney said here?
Yes, I would say they are, Greg. I've knocked a lot of doors in this county, going back, to when Dobbs first happened in 2022. I was working on a state house race in a suburban area for obviously a Democrat, and we had to go talk to a bunch of college-educated Republican women, independent women, to win that state house seat, and of course win our area for Josh Shapiro and John Fetterman. And that echo from 2022 really is just one long string going straight through to today. Women are very, very mad, and they don't want to see what has happened in other states happen in Pennsylvania. And I really think there's a lot of strong echoes between, the current race we're in and the race that Josh Shapiro ran against Doug Mastriano. We're talking about the same issues. We're talking about we have a competent candidate who is going to run a sane and good government and protect our rights. And then you have somebody just totally unhinged on the other side. And the same types of folks who crossed over to vote for Josh Shapiro are the types of folks that I think are going to cross over and vote for Kamala Harris.
Stella, let me ask you, what do you predict? Do you expect Harris to get somewhere between what Trump got in 2020 in Lancaster, which was 57%, and what Josh Shapiro got there, which is he came very close to winning it? It's going to be somewhere in the middle there. Where do you think it's going to end up?
So where I think that Kamala Harris will end up, and also where Bob Casey will end up, is somewhere in the range. Now, gubernatorial elections are a little different in turnout than presidential elections, but somewhere in the range of where Josh Shapiro and John Fetterman ended up in Lancaster County, which is they narrowly lost it, but they vastly improved margins over what any Democrats had done in recent history. So Joe Biden got 41% here in 2020, which was already a record. That was with no ground game and because of the pandemic. And here we are, the Biden and now the Harris campaigns have made a historic investment. We have 2 field offices. We have myriad of staff here. Today, I learned that we literally knocked every single turf in every single precinct in the entire county this weekend. They ran out of turf, and they're now recycling and going back through the stuff they did Saturday because we still have people going out. So with a turnout operation like this that we have never seen here, that field margin combined with the women who are voting in the post-Dobbs era, I think is going to lead to a historic margin for a Democratic presidential candidate here in Lancaster.
Yeah, I mean, if Harris can get within a few points of Trump in that county, which it sounds like you're saying will happen, that would be really pretty striking. I mean, presuming that Trump maybe squeezes a little more juice out of the very rural, deep red counties in the state, and there are many of those, as we know, the key will be to bring down those margins in places like Lancaster, and it sounds like you say that's going to happen.
I'm confident that we're going to get increased margin. I don't know if I want to pin it down to a specific percent because I don't know that anybody knows that, but boy, if we hit 50%, put me back on and I'll take full. No,
you got
it's been a huge team effort with a bunch of people, but we are definitely going to see historic margins. And we're seeing that in the volunteers that are coming out to knock those doors. Yesterday, we had 500 folks signed up to knock doors. I think we did 50,000 doors this weekend. The level of energy that we have seen all cycle since the spring here in Lancaster County and the volunteers that are coming out of the woodwork it's just totally amazing.
Very remarkable for a place that Trump carried by 57%. I want to center the role of Trump's violence in what Liz Cheney is saying to women. Listen to this from her on The View, where she was asked about Trump recently fantasizing about putting her with a rifle with 9 gun barrels shooting at her.
What he did a couple of days ago, he's never done before. Taking the step of saying, 9 rifles shooting her in the face. And he knows what he's doing. Yeah. He knows it's a threat. It's an attempt to intimidate. Yeah. Obviously, the intimidation won't work. But what he's doing, frankly, is every day when I'm out there, I'm talking about his lack of fitness and especially making sure people remember what he did while he watched television as our Capitol was attacked. For over 3 hours, he watched police officers be brutally beaten. He was told the vice president had been evacuated. He said, so what? People were rushing in, pleading with him, tell the mob to leave, and he wouldn't. And that level of depravity, he knows he has no defense to that.
Stella, E.J. Dionne recently wrote that Trump is closing on a barrage of violence and threats. There's this line about Cheney. There's Trump talking about people shooting their way through reporters. There's Trump laying the groundwork to overturn a loss by complaining about supposed voter fraud in your county and a few others. There's Trump saying he'll protect women whether they like it or not. It seems like this argument from Liz Cheney that Trump's violence is unacceptable really might work on female voters. What are you seeing out there on this?
Well, first of all, since I know there's been a lot in the news about Lancaster County and our Board of Elections, we are going to have a free and fair election here in Lancaster County. There was a small number of applications for voter registration applications that were rejected, caught and rejected. That happens in every presidential election cycle, and, it was handled appropriately. Unfortunately, Donald Trump is out there spreading conspiracy theories. And I think, with the help to some extent of our 2 MAGA county commissioners who hold the majority on the Board of Commissioners, which is very disappointing. Despite that, we are going to have a free and fair and peaceful election in Lancaster County tomorrow. I'm very confident of that. To the second part of your question, this is who Donald Trump is. He's someone who commits violence against women. He's an adjudicated rapist. He constantly talks in violent terms about, knocking people out and what he's going to do to them. And, I think we all know there's plenty of anecdotes that this is the kind of guy that he is. He has absolutely no problem threatening women and using physical force on women to get whatever he wants. So the good news is I don't think Liz Cheney is scared of that. And it just is a chance to remind women that this guy is an abuser. He's a creep. He's not someone I have a 13-year-old daughter. I would never leave her alone in a room with Donald Trump. And I don't think any mother would leave their daughter alone in a room with Donald Trump. So this is who he is. This is a guy who enjoys violence against women, thinks it's fun, thinks it's funny, and he seems to think that other men enjoy that kind of rhetoric as well. But I know that most men, the vast majority of men, also reject that thinking.
Fever, cough, congestion. When the symptoms keep coming, but you've got to keep going, you can rely on Mucinex Fast Max All-in-One. Just 1 dose of Mucinex Fast Max All-in-One relieves up to 9 cold and flu symptoms, helping you get on with your day. Need cold and flu relief? Get Mucinex Fast Max All-in-One and Done Relief. It's comeback season. Use as directed.
Blinds.com is kicking off the savings early with Black Friday mega deals all month long. A Blinds.com design expert can help you make the perfect selection on your schedule. We can even handle everything from measure to your whole home installed for just one low cost. With over 25 million windows covered, Blinds.com is the #1 online retailer of custom window coverings. Save up to 45% on select styles, plus a free professional measure right now at Blinds.com. Rules and restrictions may apply.
Stella, speaking of who Trump is, there's also Trump's recent hate rally at Madison Square Garden, which featured a quote-unquote joke about Puerto Rico being an island of garbage and other vile racism like that. There's a large population of Puerto Ricans in Lancaster, but some of them do seem pretty right-leaning. Realistically, how plausible is it that Harris gets some of those voters in your county due to Trump's rally, and how does that figure into the larger calculus of the state, do you think?
Well, we have a very vibrant Puerto Rican community here and a vibrant Latino community with families from all over Central South America and Mexico and the Caribbean, everywhere. And it's a beautiful thing that we have such a large Latino community here. There are a whole lot of folks coming in off of our Spanish language canvassing efforts, of which we have a ton of people going out from our community who are Spanish speakers going out and doing canvassing in English and in Spanish to these communities. And they're coming back and telling us that folks are very mad that it has changed their vote or it has motivated people to turn out and vote. Anecdotally, a good friend of mine had a coworker who's Puerto Rican who has registered to vote but had never voted in her life. She called me a week ago yesterday, and they needed mail-in ballot applications ASAP. So I drove those out to them at work because they didn't have time to get them back. I brought those applications back to the Board of Elections, and we got them mail-in ballots. My friend texted me today and said that this Puerto Rican voter who had never voted before returned her mail-in ballot, and she cried. So those are the types of anecdotes that I'm seeing. I think it is absolutely a huge demographic problem for Donald Trump. We saw when the second gentleman was here this weekend, there were people in that room waving Puerto Rican flags. There were folks lining the street waiting to see him holding up Puerto Rican flags and American flags and Harris Wall signs. So I think it's a huge problem for him.
Those little anecdotes really say a lot, I think, about what's going on. Let's go big picture. The polling averages show an absolute dead heat in Pennsylvania right now. Democrats are still struggling to win back working-class whites, which are a disproportionately large constituency in Pennsylvania. To win the state, Harris has to shave those margins down while getting huge numbers out of the collar suburban counties around Philadelphia. But women are key to both of those, right? She has to win over some working-class women to limit Trump's working-class margins, and he's, doing really well with working-class whites and cutting into Democratic margins among working-class non-whites. And she also has to win big among college-educated suburban women around Philadelphia. When you talk about that, it seems like the key is just getting as many women from all these different constituencies as possible, right?
Well, women make their voting choices for a bunch of reasons. But the one thing that I would point out is that, the Biden-Harris administration and certainly the Harris-Walz campaign have been very focused on economic issues that impact working class women, labor issues. They've been incredibly strong on the labor unions, incredibly strong on kitchen table issues, talking about price gouging, increasing home ownership, child care, prescription drug costs, medical costs. There's all kinds of economic reasons why voting for Kamala Harris is the best choice. And I think that is definitely part of, I can't speak to the Philadelphia suburbs, but, for around here, it's definitely part of the thing that we talk to voters about is the economy and prices. Certainly Bob Casey's message on greedflation is one that's really caught on here. in my part of Pennsylvania. People love that. They really trust Senator Casey on that issue. And I think that message is breaking through as well. So it's not just reproductive freedom in healthcare, but it's also, the economic issues and the family care issues, caring for elderly parents, caring for children. I do think that there's a strong message there that's breaking through with women.
To your point, I think people miss this, but an enormous amount of resources is going into advertising on the economy. It's not just reproductive rights, even though reproductive rights is an economic issue in its own way. Tons and tons of money is going into ads in Pennsylvania and all the other swing states talking about Harris's economic message or agenda. We really miss that when we talk about how Harris is making an issue out of Trump. There's all this communication happening under the radar as well about the economy, right?
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's under the radar. I mean, it's definitely something that voters talk to us about. I would say, when we're knocking doors, the first thing is just so many people just cannot stand Trump. They want him gone. They don't want to have to think about him ever again. And they will crawl across broken glass to vote against him. He's toxic to voters. That is probably the number one thing I've heard knocking doors all cycle. Reproductive freedom, and be that IVF, birth control access, abortion. It's bigger than just abortion. And I think that is the one difference in the talking about reproductive health care. That is a difference from 2022 when people really thought, oh, this is just abortion. And it hadn't really sunk in at that point that this means you can die of sepsis if you have a miscarriage. And now we're seeing that happen to people. People are understanding that and how scary that is. We're seeing more men for that reason too talk about it. It really is a broad message that is breaking through with women. But on the economy specifically, I think that especially since the debate, she has really improved her messaging on the economy, and that is breaking through to voters. And that's part of, the conversations that we're having at the doors as well.
Just to close this out, how important are right-leaning women in the end to winning Pennsylvania? And does Liz Cheney have a real shot at reaching enough of them?
Oh, yeah. I mean, we here in Lancaster County, we actually had the first Republicans for Harris event in the nation. We have a former Republican chair of the county party here named Ann Womble has been the statewide co-chair of that. If you told me 10 years ago I'd be at a rally with Ann Womble and I would hug Joe Walsh at the end of it, it would have I would have thought you were crazy. But, here we are. And that something the Harris campaign has done extremely well is sort of create these permission structures for folks who maybe don't agree and will never agree with Kamala Harris on policy, but they're creating a permission structure to still view yourself as a Republican, because there are still many decent Republicans out there. And to view yourself as a Republican, but yet make this choice, the same one that Liz Cheney is encouraging people to make, to vote for Kamala Harris, to get rid of Donald Trump, because there are a lot of people out there who actually want their old Republican Party back, and we'll be healthier as a nation if we have a strong two-party system. So yes, absolutely. I think that is true. Here in Lancaster County, Nikki Haley got 20% in the primary. Some of our precincts, she was getting 30 and 40%. So there are a lot of Republicans out there who are very dissatisfied with having Donald Trump on the ballot again. And I do think that with the outreach that we've been doing, that, yeah, they're gonna vote for her.
Well, that's certainly a critical piece of the puzzle in beating Trump. Stella Sexton, thanks so much for talking to us today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on.
Folks, make sure to check out some new content we have up at TNR.com. Michael Tomasky arguing that Donald Trump has lost his shit, and the only question is whether enough voters will recognize it. And Parker Malloy arguing that we already know who the big loser in this election is, the mainstream media. And check out the latest episode of Above Average Intelligence on the DSR Network, where Michael Weiss joins Mark Polymeropoulos to examine the election from a foreign policy perspective. And quick note to listeners, we will not have an episode on Wednesday morning because everybody is going to want to talk about the election, and we record the day before. So we will bring you an episode as soon as we can after we know a little more about the election. Thanks for your patience. You've been listening to The Daily Blast with me, your host, Greg Sargent. The Daily Blast is a New Republic podcast and is produced by Riley Fessler and the DSR Network.